Today we are with Przemek Lubecki. He's an attorney in New Orleans, Louisiana, right?
Yep.
And he has tried so many cases since a young age. Przemek has a very interesting background. He was born in Poland and moved around the globe until landing in the US to become a trial lawyer. So it's going to be interesting to talk about his young years. Thank you for being here with me,
Listen,
Przemek.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's always good to talk shop, and you're obviously a great guy, and I haven't known you for that long,
Right.
but I feel like we've connected. You know what I mean? Whether it's our background, our stories, and just everything that we talked about over the
Right.
last couple of days.
Need a trial lawyer who will fight for you? Call Lathrop Law Firm at 760-723-9612 or visit www.lathroplawfirm.com.
Przemek, you were born in Poland.
Yes, I was born in Poland in 1979, and I grew up in Poland. I went to school, played soccer, and hung out, and until 1987, when we left Poland and we moved to Germany to escape communism.
Wow, that's amazing. How was Poland during those years? Do you remember anything?
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember a lot. For me as a kid, in hindsight now, I can see how life for my parents was very difficult
Right.
to raise kids, with very limited means, but everybody was broke, so it's all relative, I suppose. I had a great childhood in that sense. My mom was a physicist in Poland. My dad at that point was doing some fighting and some training.
Where in Poland was this?
Wrocław,
Okay.
like Wrocław, I guess is the way that Americans pronounce it, and Breslav is a name that Germans pronounced it when they, took over Poland. And I just remember every summer just going to my grandma's, either in Warsaw or in Gryfów, a small little town on my mom's side, and just going to the lake and hanging out, playing soccer, just doing regular
Right.
regular kid stuff.
You had a happy childhood during those
man.
years.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah.
Okay. And when you say escaping communism, so how was that affecting your parents, if you know?
Yeah, so I mean, just limited opportunity, and I
Right.
think they did it more for me and for my brother than for themselves. I mean, they had jobs; they were doing fine by Polish standards, but there's obviously limited opportunity in a communist country to be able to excel. I mean, my mom, as a physicist, was making the same amount of money as the janitor that was sweeping her place of work, her lab or whatever.
Wow.
So it's not a society that rewards merit. It just rewards party affiliation, and that was one of the reasons that they wanted to leave, because they refused to join the Communist Party, and that made things very difficult for them.
So where in Germany did you end up living?
Duisburg. So my
Okay.
dad left probably 6 or 8 months before we did,
Okay.
and so he sort of, I guess, escaped Poland, went to Germany. We left with like papers or fake papers, so I don't know exactly how they did it, but so he went to Germany to work, and he would send money back, and he was working illegally there in Germany without a right to work, doing construction and scaffold stuff and whatever else he was doing, and then eventually just brought us over.
To the U.S.
Well, to Germany, or where we lived there for a year and a half.
for a year and a half. Okay.
Yeah, so I attended school in Germany, and but while we were living there, we knew as a family that the goal was to get political asylum in the U.S. Unlike some of my classmates, let's say, because I went to a school that had some Polish people there, a lot of them wanted to establish residency and asylum in Germany, and were not looking beyond Germany at America for whatever reason. Whereas for us, we always knew that Germany was just like a stopping point.
Yeah.
At least that's what we were hoping for before we got sponsored or whatever to come to the U.S.
Okay. And then you come to the U.S. in 1987.
So 87 was to Germany, 89 was U.S. I was 10 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how was landing in the U.S. The culture shock?
Yeah. So, and
And your name is Przemek.
Przemek, yeah.
And you know, it sounds like a name you would see everywhere, but if you see it in writing, it's intimidating to
difficult.
pronounce that,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. In the old country, we couldn't afford the vowels between the consonants, you know. So, you know, and I'm going to date myself, but when we came in '89, we came over on a TWA Airlines flight. You know, TWA is not even around anymore, and the plane had a smoking section. You know, so it's just a different era
Right.
completely from what's going on now. But again, you know, I was a kid, and I feel like as a kid, it's just so easy to adjust. Kids are just so resilient in general. Like, you know, I spoke fluent German before I left Germany. I don't speak it anymore, but my brother does because he's 5 years older.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we landed in the U.S. We were living in St. Louis. That's where we stayed until high school. And then when I left for college, my parents are still there. They have a nice little community there. But it was, you know, as a kid, it was different, certainly, right? I mean, the biggest thing for me was when we landed, seeing these giant American cars, and I was just like in awe. They had wood panels on the side of the doors and stuff, and I just thought that was super cool.
Right.
And, you know, eventually we sort of assimilated, and it just became normal, I guess.
So you land in Louisiana?
So I'm
New
in
Orleans?
Louisiana now,
Okay.
but I was in St. Louis, Missouri for high school.
St. Louis,
Yeah,
okay.
so like right Midwest, center of the country, and went to, you know, middle school and high school there, and then I left St. Louis, went to New Orleans for college. I went to Tulane University for undergrad.
Good school.
Yeah, great school.
Yeah.
I had a great time. You know, my brother went to Harvard and he tried to get me in. He was like, "Oh, I know some admissions people," but I just didn't have the academic chops that he did. But Tulane was great, man. I made great friends. I had a great time there, and I partied just enough to not be able to do medicine, which is probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
So I heard about the Tulane University when I was in Chile, still as a lawyer, because they had a very good law school there, right?
They do, yeah. Tulane
Yeah.
has a great law school now. I just went to Tulane for undergrad.
I know, but
Yeah.
I know that they also have a very good law school. It's a great school in general.
Yes,
One of the
yeah.
partners of this firm where I was working, one of the three biggest law firms in Santiago, he did a master's in environmental law.
Oh
in-
yeah, you know, so Tulane
Yeah.
has I think maybe because of its Louisiana's connection to oil and gas,
Yeah.
they have a big environmental
Yeah.
law section. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, and if he's listening to this, Nicolás Balmaceda is his name.
Okay, very
yeah,
cool.
I like the guy. We got very
Yeah,
close
and,
when I was working
I'll give
there.
him the Tulane shout out too, even though I don't know him.
Yeah, he's a great guy. So well, then you go to law school. Did you know you wanted to go to law school to be a lawyer since your early years? How is it that you end up becoming a lawyer?
So you're actually the first person that's ever asked me that.
No
That's-
way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And so, you know, I guess even without giving it any thought, I think, like what I said before, like I partied enough where I couldn't go to medical school. But I think personality-wise, I would not have been suited to be a doctor. I love, for whatever reason, like I abhor and hate and never want any conflict in my own personal life. And I'm, you know, I just live my life to not have any conflicts. But for whatever reason, I'm drawn to conflict when I can do the fighting for somebody else. And so just personality-wise, whether it's like a certain amount of rebellion or indignation or just having that character, it just fit my personality better. And not that I even knew what being a lawyer or a trial lawyer involved, because like anything else in life, you know, we fall into what we do sometimes through happy accidents or whatever.
right.
But it, you know, once I sort of had an idea of, just from TV even, just popular culture of what lawyers do, the idea of being a trial lawyer really appealed to me. And so when the idea of going to med school, which was probably not even my dream, it was just, you know, hey, That's what successful people do. People who have nice cars are doctors. I mean, that's kind of what my impression was growing up. Growing up not having a whole lot of money. Once that idea coalesced, I just thought, man, it's super cool. And obviously being a trial lawyer is super American. I
Right.
mean, we're so unique in what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that I knew I could do and probably do pretty well just based on, I guess, just blind ambition.
Yeah, being a trial lawyer to me, it's like being in the pinnacle of what being an attorney is, right? It's
I agree.
and it only happens in America because you have jury trials. I
Yeah.
feel that bench trials are not the same because you have the
100%.
same judge looking at the same issue over and
All
over
the
again.
time.
So it's impossible to not
Yeah.
get desensitized, right?
Yeah. So
Uh,
I don't know how many bench trials I've done. It's actually not been that many because in Illinois, there's a jury demand on every case, basically, unless somebody screws something up. And in Louisiana, every case I handle is a jury case. But the reason that I don't like jury trials, the reason I do not like bench trials
bench trials.
is because there's just your ability to make a difference as a lawyer is so limited.
Right.
Exactly like you said.
Yeah.
The judge has heard the same issues. He's not going to be swayed by you, by your personality, by the way that you present the evidence, by the way that you connect with him, because judges don't care for the most part.
Right.
Whereas with a jury trial, that's where the art of what we do can really come to light.
Right. And let me tell you, you're hearing this from a specialist because in 2006, Przemek won an award, right? Why don't you tell a little bit more about that? You were the second lawyer that tried the most cases, or the second most tried cases during that year.
Yeah, so in Chicago, there's the jury verdict reporter. I mean, many states have a version of that.
How many trials have you tried? More
At
or
this
less?
point, probably 130 about, because I tried
130.
about 120.
Jury trials.
Yes,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a unique, and at the time I didn't know how unique it was in a sense that I work for a firm, Perillo Weiss O'Halloran in Chicago, that was always number one in the entire state every year for the number of jury trials. And we had at that point when I joined in 2005, probably about 45, 48 lawyers, something like that. And we got hired on as a class of 7 or 8 people, law students. They would not take any laterals. And they had an entire program over the summer devoted to training you up to try a case. And so you would follow people around for depositions, you would go to court, watch people try cases. And then when you were free in the afternoon, they would put on clinics on, hey, this is how you pick a jury. This is how you open. Here's a sample opening statement.
That's awesome.
Memorize it, try to present it. These are the parameters for the closing argument. How do you structure a closing argument around a burden of proof closing, let's say, if you're not calling any witnesses on your own. And it prepared us so well that I got sworn in, I think, on a Thursday. And there's a thing in Chicago called PD Fridays, where there's property damage cases, which are inherently one-day trials, where, sometimes judges will try 2 cases in one day. I mean, that's six-person jury, so they give you a limited amount of time for jury selection, put in a couple witnesses, close on the issues. It's almost like an arbitration,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I tried my first case the day after I got sworn in. I still remember it. I still remember the opposing attorney, Martha, that I tried it against.
Mm-hmm.
It was a left turn case, and I won my first trial, which, whether through luck or through, preparation or whatever else, it was kind of the building block of my confidence.
Yeah.
Because the firm I worked for had a sort of like they prided themselves on a hazing ritual where you had the wall of shame, they called it. And so everybody's photo went up on the wall of shame when we started, and you only come off the wall, not if you win a case, meaning that you get a verdict under the offer, but you have to what we call NG, not guilty. You have to get a zero verdict, a defense verdict completely to come off the wall. And so, I approached that trial, I guess, with some trepidation, but I was like, maybe I can get off the wall, maybe I can't. But, things kind of worked out. And I got off the wall first in my class. And so I was like, I'm awesome,
Right.
But that little bit of confidence, I think, it's like a building block because it makes you happy about what you're doing, and it makes you commit to doing the work for the next one.
So from growing up in Poland and then coming to the U.S., becoming a trial lawyer, you start working for the defense, right? You deal a little bit with the imposter syndrome, like every other lawyer, and you get this push out of the first results that you're getting, which feels great professionally. When is it that you decide, okay, I want to switch and start doing something for people instead of doing it for companies, right? Because that's I feel goes more in line with your personality.
100%.
And we're gonna talk more about that because you have such a great personality, and the only issue that people sometimes have with nice guys like you, and people also tell me this, like, I'm too nice, but the ability to stand up when you need to stand up for the rights of someone else, and you have that. We were talking about shaking the hand of an expert, remember?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So we can get into that, but let's go first to the question of when is it that you decide to switch paths, and from the quote unquote dark side, you switch to representing people.
Yeah. So a couple things about your question, right? So for whatever reason, I have a way easier time, just psychologically, I guess, advocating for somebody else than advocating for myself. If you and I are in some whatever interpersonal relationship or a business relationship, I'm probably not going to push back for myself the way that I would for somebody that I'm representing. It's very easy for me to really go to bat for somebody else for whatever reason, right? As far as the decision to switch sides, I don't know that it was a sort of a conscious decision. It was more circumstances of life at the time, and we can talk about that. But what I liked about being in Chicago is that even though I was representing insurance companies, my clients were drivers, right, and individuals, and so that's who I represent.
You were focusing on that element of the defense.
And so in Chicago, I represented a ton of Polish people, a ton of Hispanic people, Mexicans, people from other countries, because of the insurance companies that we represented sort of catered to that population, and
Russians as well.
Russians as well, yeah.
For some reason, I've run into a lot of truck drivers that are Russian, Polish, right?
Yeah, and I think it's just that's the pathway for opportunity for a lot of people that come here, and they're very entrepreneurial, and it's owner operator. They start their own businesses, and so I loved, the realization I had is that for the most part, all those people, whether they're Polish, Mexican, Russian, whatever they may be, they come to America and they have no exposure to our legal system whatsoever, right? They're sort of on the periphery. They buy a house, they maybe have to hire an attorney to do a closing for them. But besides that, they never really interact at all in the way that we do, right? And what we do. And it always felt so gratifying to win for them, even if I was just defending somebody else who had a righteous case, whatever. For me, it was a very ego-based practice in a sense that I just wanted to impose my will. I wanted to win, and I'm still like that on the plaintiff side when I try a case. But it felt so gratifying to give people would cry as defendants, even though it wasn't even going to be their money when they have to pay, when we would win a case, because they just wanted to be believed, and they'd never thought that they would get a fair shake in court, ever. And then suddenly they're hearing a closing argument, and you look at your client, and you just see it in their eyes, that they're just like, holy shit, this is the American system of justice. It was awesome.
Yeah.
But as far as switching, to the plaintiff side, I ended up moving to New Orleans for personal reasons, and I had sort of dabbled in doing plaintiff work at my firm in Chicago for Polish people. I would represent guys who would get into bar fights, handle, little minor criminal cases. People would ask me to represent them on auto stuff. And so long as I did not have a conflict with one of my insurance companies, I could take that in as what we call the green file. And, I would handle those cases. I would settle them. I hadn't tried any plaintiff cases. And then I ended up handling a med-mal case in St. Louis for a gentleman that had a PICC line that, things went very bad for him. And that was the first time that I realized that, there's great abuses by insurance companies, great abuses by defendants, by corporations, by hospitals.
Right.
That they hurt this guy, and man, they couldn't care less.
Right. You know who started like that? A very well-known lawyer started with the same way that you did, working for a defense firm and only handling the plaintiff files and some med-mal.
Interesting.
You know who?
Interesting. No idea.
Nick Rowley.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I was just listening to the podcast of Dan, and
I will take that.
He started with a
comparison
insurance defense, and he was handling the med-mal cases because they did med-mal defense.
Okay.
He will handle all of the med-mal plaintiff against Kaiser because they were not clients.
Very
and then also
interesting.
the few plaintiff cases until he switched and started doing plaintiff work.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So we talk about the jury trials here, and you start working as a plaintiff lawyer, and in 2006 you were working still as a defense attorney. When is it that you switched to plaintiff work?
2012. So 2005 through 2012, I was working as a defense lawyer in Chicago, and then 2012 I moved to Louisiana, and I become a plaintiff's lawyer.
Awesome. And then you start trying cases as a plaintiff, right?
Yeah.
And what are the things that you note that you have an advantage because you're coming from the defense side? What are the things that you know better than plaintiff lawyers? Because, when you, some listeners or people who would watch this, they may be lawyers or not. We're trying to approach everyone, and explain things in very simple so that everybody can listen to this. But for the young lawyers or people who want to get into law, they wonder, what do I do? Do I go right away to work in plaintiff side? Do I do defense? And I guess it's on them to decide, but it's good to give them the tools to understand how different it is, the path.
Injured and need help? Our lawyers at Lathrop Law Firm are here for you. Call 760-723-9612 or go to www.lathroplawfirm.com.
Yeah.
So for you being a defense attorney, what are the things that you note gave you an advantage maybe or knowledge that other people didn't know?
Yeah, so again, my experience in Chicago was unique in the sense that we just repped it out. We just tried a ton of cases. And so it's like experiential learning, right? And it just gives you just such insight into what the end product looks like when you're trying a case, in a way that if you're just working on cases or you're settling cases, you just don't ever see how, let's say, the discovery disputes or the discovery as it's coming in, or how something played at a deposition, how it is going to turn out at trial, or maybe the pivot points of, hey, deposition looked bad, but maybe I can prep him, maybe I can find a workaround. And so seeing a case all the way through, now it just gives me sort of confidence that no matter what happens, I have a Rolodex of sort of prior experiences where I know how to sort of fix it. Mm-hmm. I also have the confidence that if I'm looking at a case, a lot of times I still see a case from the defense perspective of how would I wreck this case? How would I destroy it? How would I try to win or get a low judgment or whatever? and I feel like I can do it better than the defense attorney I'm up against for the most part. And so that just gives me confidence essentially. And a lot of our game, man, it's just confidence, confidence based. But as far as advice for people of what they should do, should you go plaintiff first? Should you go defense first? Should you go work with a prosecutor's office or a public defender's office? It's a hard call because I think there's phenomenal lawyers that have done each and every single one of those paths, and there's lawyers that did something different completely, right? Maybe there's a transactional lawyer who became a plaintiff, a great plaintiff lawyer. But if you want to get that courtroom experience, do whatever you can, I think, to get in the courtroom.
To try cases.
Yeah, and just figure out if it fits your personality.
Right.
Because there's a lot of lawyers that I know who think that they want to be trial lawyers, but they just don't. For whatever reason, it's like a personality thing almost. They just don't have the character or the personality for it, and it gives them like an ulcer essentially to do what feels okay for me, and I don't have a problem with it.
Right.
So I think the sooner you get that experience, the sooner you know if it's for you. And I think more important than whether you work for the PD's office or the prosecutor's office or a defense firm or a plaintiff firm is find good people to work for. That's also hard to sort of delineate when you're a young attorney, but finding good mentorship, oh man, that's probably 99% of my success as a trial lawyer is Cliff Panic, the guy that I work for in Chicago. He was an amazing teacher, amazing mentor. His nickname was PFD, Prince of Effing Darkness. That's what the plaintiffs' lawyers called him because he would wreck their cases.
That's amazing.
And so, everything that I knew as a defense lawyer, I learned from him. And he gave me sort of the confidence to be creative on trial. And we would, come back from trial and tell our war stories and bullshit, and sort of through that osmosis of hearing other people talk about their cases, whether at a bar after trial or at lunch or whatever else, you learn so much because your brain is just always absorbing it. So it's good to be, I think, with great people, great mentors, and people who are working the cases and are then willing to talk and share and let you be sort of part of the team.
Yeah, that's amazing. So talking about creativity, why don't we talk a little bit about the cases that you have tried and the ones that you remember the most, or maybe some experience you had in the courtroom that you remember that made you change your mind about certain things. What's a memorable case that you had?
So on the defense side, there's just so many cases, right?
Crazy things happen in the courtroom, and you gotta be on your feet.
Things. Yeah. So, and I don't know if I've ever told this story to anybody before, but a lot of the defense cases were not cases of any real consequence to anybody, right? But when you're like a dog in a bone, like you just want to win no matter what. And so, like earlier today, when you asked me about being a plaintiff's lawyer and then switching, being a defense lawyer and then switching to the plaintiff side. And I think back and I go, man, is there anything that I've ever done as a defense lawyer that was underhanded or something that I would not be proud of now? And there are things where I've taken advantage and done things, or maybe made arguments that embarrass people, or sometimes it backfires.
Nobody's
on me
perfect,
too, right?
Yeah,
but I sort of excuse it in the sense that in the fog of the conflict, of the fog of the trial, I'm just trying to win, man. I don't care about anybody's feelings or whether necessarily something is right or wrong. And would I do that now at 44 or 45, what I did at 25? No. But I remember one case where, I was representing a young lady defendant who ended up hitting a parking lot case, but like a massive crash into a guy who was just sitting in his car, and he was listening to an audiobook, like a cassette tape or a CD or whatever in his car. And I really had absolutely no defense to the case. I mean, she essentially was saying that she just slammed into him, and it was like, a T-bone type impact, massive damage. I mean, like, the gentleman was legitimately hurt. And I really had no liability defense, and I didn't really put on any liability evidence, but I didn't admit fault. At least not, I don't think I admitted fault. And then my only argument was because this parking lot was next to a playground. And I just, arguing inferences from the evidence, we all know that there's a playground there. And I just, would look at the jury and I would say, why haven't we heard what he was really doing there? Listen, I'm not Perry Mason. I'm not going to be able to ask the guy on cross-examination as to what he was really doing next to that playground in the car. Was he really listening to an audio tape? So sort of like a salacious, implying something that I cannot prove, right?
Right.
And so that was obviously.
Were you admonished by, or did you receive any objection?
No, because I did it. I soft-sold it, right? I mean, like today, I'm sort of being more explicit about how I argued it. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I did it in a sort of cagey way where you couldn't put your finger on it, and it was very subtle as to what I was doing. And so the jury,
you planted a seed in the.
I planted a seed.
Juries.
Yeah, and so is that something I'm proud of now? No, but at that point, I'm just trying to win, right?
You crushed it.
Yeah, and so
for the defense.
Yeah, and so we got a defense verdict on a case.
That was a Houdini type of defense.
Yeah, and again, listen, maybe I just got lucky or whatever. Maybe they didn't like the guy, but I do feel like that argument, taken together with maybe the way that he looked, because he was not like a gregarious person. Like, he didn't connect with the jury. He was just sort of he was himself, whatever.
Right.
But he did not get a fair shake in that case because of me, right?
Right.
But again, I have a client to represent, and so I like the defendant. Mm-hmm. I mean, I met her that morning at trial. I mean, I didn't, we get the files and we go try them. But I liked the little girl. She was like 16, 17, 18, whatever years old at the time. She seemed real sweet, and I had nothing else, but I wanted to win, and so that's the path that I took.
Right. So now that you're doing plaintiff work and you see on the other side of the table these truck drivers, I'm sure you've seen people from Eastern Europe or do you deal with some feelings of guilt are you is it complicated for you to hear and go against these guys, or is it something that you learn to manage and you just approach it differently? Because we were talking about this situation with the expert, right?
Right.
And just so that everybody understands what we're talking about here, it's an expert you're crossing in trial, and an expert stands up, goes to your table, and offers to shake your hand, right? And my impulse would be to shake the expert's hand. But everybody there in the room we were told me you should never do that.
Right.
And you especially, you told me I would never ever do that.
I've had it
being
happen.
Such a nice guy, you know.
I've had it happen.
To me, I would feel bad not doing that to a person that is trying to shake my hand.
Yeah.
But these are mind games that you learn by being in court.
Right.
So from your perspective, that you had that happening, and we can talk about that, I feel that you have dealt with situations where you're just learning and know how to approach to them differently. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important tip or advice for young plaintiff lawyers that deal with these feelings of guilt. Because in my case, I remember I was taking the position of a Russian truck driver, and I was, smashing the guy in terms of like the questions that I was asking, and the guy didn't know what to do, felt super weird during the deposition. And as much as I did great in the deposition and the case was going awesome for my client, I came with a bitter feeling after, and my parents were visiting. I remember we went to the beach together, and I couldn't get out of the feeling of being so mean with this guy. How do you deal with this situation?
Well, so two things. If it's just a deposition, and there's no optics involved, meaning that the jury is not observing what's happening, then I'm going to be kind as always, right? Because I do think that there is no reason to be crass or cruel or cold or not nice to anybody for any reason. And so normally in a deposition, I will always say, I'll shake their hand and I'll say, I'm sorry that we have to meet under these circumstances. I mean, they're good people, right? For the most part. They're not evil. Let's say a defendant driver. A lot of times in a trucking case, the defendant driver is as much or more a victim of the defendant trucking company as your client, right? And they may not even like their employer. They may have already gotten fired after the wreck, and maybe they were put in circumstances that contributed or caused the wreck. The optics that we're talking about, as far as the expert coming off the stand after adversarial cross-examination and then coming up to shake the hand, is different because he is running game on us as lawyers to make it seem like this is just a game, because he wants the jury to see that, hey, we do this all the time. This cross-examination was meaningless because he knows me, I know him. We're participating in a charade for the jury. That's what that handshake communicates to me, and it communicates to the jury. And so because of that, I war game a lot of times these situations in my mind. That's something I learned from Cliff, is that you got to, he always told me that Prime Minister of England, Winston Churchill, during World War II was always very witty and always had great comebacks, and just in general in his political life.
He has very well-known phrases as well.
Yeah, well-known quotes. But he would, I think Cliff maybe read a biography of him or something and said that he admitted at one point that he would sort of prepare and war game different scenarios in his head so that when a situation lent itself to a sharp comeback, he would have it ready at the tip of his tongue. Yeah. And so I did the same thing in court, and I still do that now, where I sit there and I war game and sort of mentally rehearse different situations that may come up so that I'm ready with the comeback to an objection or a speaking objection or, various situations that might come up, so that I'm not ever caught flat-footed. But that requires, you can be sharp or whatever, but a lot of times it's just in the work and the mental prep that you do ahead of time. And so that scenario came up, and so he came up to me and held out his hand, and I just looked at him, and I said, "No, sir." And continued to look at him until he sort of put his head down and walked away. It was like a biomechanical expert, well-known defense biased expert on, trying to relate that the strength of the impact or whatever couldn't have caused the injuries. And so if it's something that's going to be deleterious to my client's case and the optics, man, I'm never going to shake his hand.
So and then the natural reaction of some jurors would be, why is he so mean with the guy, maybe, So then you tell them something that you said this to me, and I think it's important to close the circle that way. Because that really tells the jury why you did it.
Yes.
And it empowers your position and makes this handshake look even worse, right?
Right, and it makes it sort of excusable from my perspective and lets them know that explains the reason. And so I forget what I told you the other night at dinner, but, I'll say something like, ladies and gentlemen, I like to thank the judge, his staff, Madam Court Reporter, because, trials are a really stressful thing that we go through. And they really worked hard this week. We all worked hard to try to put on a trial that's going to be as little of an impact and inconvenience on your life as possible. And if I've ever lost sight of that, of the sanctity of the courtroom and of how serious this is in here, I'm sorry for that. And, you may be wondering why I didn't shake Mr. So-and-so's, biomechanical expert's hand. And, if that's the way you perceive it, I apologize. But everybody who's sitting in my client's chair would appreciate somebody fighting hard for them, because this is her only case. This is her only chance of justice. He gets to go home, and he's going to work on other cases. And that's the message that he's trying to convey, is that this is just a charade. It's just a game. And I think that hits with the jury, right?
Right.
Because they saw him doing that, and maybe their initial impression of it was that, man, this guy just got off the stand. He was trying to be nice, even though this lawyer was just impeaching him on credibility and on how much money he's making and on how many times he's testified for the defense. And this lawyer told him, shook his head and made a frown and said, "No, sir." And that may have hit negatively in their heart on me, right?
Right.
But I think having that explained, and you sort of flip the script a little bit, where it's like, hey, that's not at all what's going on.
Right.
That's the bad side.
Yeah.
We're the ones that are here for justice, for the person that was injured through no fault of their own,
Right.
by a company that put reckless drivers out on the road. And these are the lengths that these guys will go to deny them that.
Right.
So-
No, that's amazing. That's great
Thanks, man.
feedback, and I really like it. We're running out of time, but you're here attending the conference TLU. We have to shout out to where we are right now. You've been teaching boot camp, right?
Yeah.
So before we have to go, why don't you tell what you've been doing and
Yeah.
what are the things that you're teaching? Because it's a great program that
man.
people should do.
It's so. Shout out to Dan Ambrose.
Yeah.
TLU is, man, there's nothing like it.
Right.
There's nothing like TLU on demand. There's nothing like this entire program. It literally is the best trial lawyers in the country who are freely sharing all their knowledge, experience, know-how, tricks of the trade with each other and with us.
Right.
And I came here on Saturday, so 3 or 4 days before the conference began, to teach the trial skills boot camp that Dan Ambrose has been teaching. We've been teaching them in Vegas, and New York, and Vegas and all that. And it gives an opportunity for people to learn in a very controlled setting using essentially scripts that teach the physicality of the courtroom and of connecting with people. And that is, I think, what sets TLU honestly apart from every other conference. Yes, are there breakouts at other conferences where you get to interact and sort of take some reps of things? Yeah. But what's different about this here is that the boot camps really focus on just the performative aspect of trial, which is you can have all the strategy in the world,
Right.
you can have all the evidence in the world, unless you're connecting with that jury and unless you can convey your client's story, you may not be delivering justice for your client. And so that's, I think, what sets this conference apart.
Right.
The other thing I spoke on was mental performance, based on my sports background or whatever else, and some of the things
Yeah,
I
because
do now.
you were practicing in boxing, right?
Yeah, so I used to do fighting, Golden Gloves boxing in Chicago, and again, not at a super high level, right? I mean, I was an amateur fighter, but there's certain aspects of that trade and working really, really hard. It's a very cruel and unforgiving sport. I mean, you're dishing out violence, right?
Yeah.
That I think, one, mindset-wise, is a little bit different from some other sports. And then once I came to Louisiana and I was sort of aged out of fighting, I picked up competitive shooting. And the nice thing about competitive shooting is that it melds actually with trial work really well, because competitive shooting is sort of at the forefront of sports psychology for whatever reason. Like the godfather of sports psychology is a guy, Lenny Basham, who teaches about mental performance, and so now he has become essentially like the go-to guy for every elite golfer, every elite tennis player, and the idea of speed shooting, you're running around with a gun, shooting gun, rifle, whatever it is. How is that at all related to trial work? It's crazy, but it relates sort of immediately to what we do, in the
So
sense that
interesting.
skills are subconscious.
Psychologically, right?
Yeah.
It's just-
So
Well,
skills
that-
belong in a separate sphere. Your self-image and your confidence about what you do belongs in a separate sphere, and how to sort of grow both of those circles at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, there is a famous quote that Dan used to use that I really like. It's a Mike Tyson's quote. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right?
Yeah,
and that tells you the
true.
power of improvising and being ready for the unknown.
Yeah.
And have like the different scenarios that you were saying, thinking what's the worst case scenario,
Yes.
so that they don't find you standing with the wrong foot.
And a lot of times, listen, it's stress inoculation, right? So everybody that comes to the boot camps gets so many reps of doing it the right way under the tutelage of a coach who exactly knows how to sort of help fix some of the things that they're doing so that they are able to connect. And then they do it in a setting that is both friendly but challenging, sort of on the cusp of their ability.
Right.
And then the next time, there is no sort of anxiety. They're pushed more towards arousal. Like their brain is like, I am so excited to talk to every single jury now because I'm confident, right? Yeah. I'm in my zone that I want to be in, as opposed to like questioning my preparation or concerned about, thinking about the outcome. That's the wrong place to be.
You probably know this, but the whatever chemically happens in your brain when you're stressed, when you're nervous, is the same that happens when you're excited.
Yes.
And I think many people that perform say the way to beat those fears is to tell your body, I am not nervous, I'm excited. Yes. And all of a sudden you make a switch. Yeah. And then also it's being on your feet and creating this like automatic machine where it doesn't matter what happens, I'm ready because I've been doing this so many times.
Yeah. Yeah, so like in the shooting sports, pressure is an amplifier. Mm-hmm. And it's an amplifier of whatever emotional state that we're in. So if we are concerned, if we are anxious, that's what pressure is going to amplify. I mean, no different. Think about if you were in a championship game, right? And the coach is going to give you the ball and say, hey, Federico, you're going to be the guy that takes a shot that either wins it or loses it for us, right?
Right.
If you've been there before, if you've played in that kind of pressure before, you're going to go, you know what? I'm going to make this shot because I've made this shot thousands of times before. Whereas if you haven't been there before, you're going to be pushed more towards your conscious mind, hyper-analyzing, what's the angle of my foot have to be? When do I release the ball?
You overthink.
You overthink, and
you
you
know
overtry.
where it also applies? I just started to play golf, and I've been reading this Ben Hogan book, and what he says is, for everyone, it's like, how can you play so well when you're in such a tournament, like such a stressing situation like a tournament? And these guys have been practicing this movement so much that the more pressure they put, the more emphasis into what they are doing, the better they play.
Yes.
So that their mind doesn't really play against them.
So if you build and take care of your self-image, which is what I think my firm in Chicago was so good at, and what I have sort of like cultivated since then, if you build up your self-image, or view yourself, your confidence as a trial lawyer, right? And there's ways to do that. You are then able to get access to your level of training. Whereas if you are constantly, and a lot of type A people are very negative on themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And if you are sort of interpreting your performance always in a negative way, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Because, I want to be realistic about where I'm at. As opposed to thinking positively of, hey, what's the fix so that I can apply the correction next time, right? Mm-hmm. Rerunning it in your head so that you get a positive imprint of that interaction, of that deposition, of that examination, of that closing, of that opening, of that question on voir dire. You rerun it back with the correction, visualize it, the same as an athlete visualizes doing well. Mm-hmm. Your brain doesn't know the difference. It myelinates the pathway of doing it the correct way, and myelinates the pathway of you seeing yourself as the person that you're trying to become, which is a great trial lawyer. All of us are here at TLU for the exact same reason, right? We all want to be great.
We want to be better.
And we want to become like the Rowleys, the Panishes, the Ravaputis.
And even those guys are here, right? Like the Panishes, and even those guys train. And
yes. So what does that say about all the guys that, let's say, mentor other lawyers? They're not here. are they really that great? You know what I
Right.
mean? Because there's a humility to all these guys. Yeah, are they confident? Yes, but they're also extremely humble because they know that they don't know everything, and they know that there's so much more to learn, man.
Looking for dedicated legal support? Contact Lathrop Law Firm at 760-723-9612 or check out www.lathroplawfirm.com.
But yeah, TLU,
Yeah.
the best thing in the world. I love coming
And
here.
and they are lucky to have you as an instructor.
Man, it's so fun.
yeah.
It's so much fun, man.
You're a great instructor. I mean,
Thank
I've
you,
done the
man.
program 3 times.
Thank you, man.
And I really enjoyed when you were, teaching me some of these skills.
Awesome.
It was great.
Yeah,
So
and obviously you have the personality, man. You have, between your personality and your accent, man, and the growth mindset, there is no stopping you, bro.
thank you.
So,
I appreciate it.
I admire you too, man.
Thank you. That was great.
Awesome, man.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much, man.